Who are a few of the most corrupt cops you don't want to come across? Let's find out, starting with number 5. 6 corrupt cops, 1 corrupted minor. 6 corrupt cops were charged after their unsavory interactions with a then 19-year-old call girl who went by the name Celeste Guap. Her real name is Jasmine Abuslin. She claimed that the police retained her for servicing officers and that she was forced to provide adult favors in return for protection, money, and other forms of consideration. The scandal got nationwide attention after Officer Brandon O'Brien intentionally kicked the bucket when he learned that Guap had plans to contact the police to expose him and others. However, O'Brien wasn't the only one. Guap has gone on to mention 6 other officers that she claims sent her obscene texts and had intimate relations with her. One of the 6 officers is Lieutenant Andre Hill, who had intimate relations with Guap in her home. He was eventually fired by the police. Another implicated officer is Lieutenant Felix Tan, a 20-year veteran who had served as the chief of staff to the police chief in the city. According to Guap, Tan had exchanged obscene texts with her as well. Despite the severity of his crime, Tan merely received a letter of reprimand. Sergeant Gerard Tong wasn't as lucky as Tan. Tong had gone much further with Guap than Tan had, so he was fired by the police department. The other 3 officers accused by Guap are Sergeant Terrence Jackson, Mike Rude, and Armando Moreno. Jackson had been intimate with Guap while on duty and uniform, so the department made moves to fire him. However, his appeal was successful and he was reinstated, but with lower pay. Rude didn't have intimate relations with Guap, but he, like Tan, exchanged obscene texts with her. When asked why, Rude had the brilliant answer that he had wanted to meet with her just to let her know that he wasn't interested. Moreno, on the other hand, did the deed with Guap off duty. But those 6 Guap accused weren't the only officers implicated in the scandal. According to internal investigations, 11 officers were eventually implicated. 3 were kicked off the force, 6 received letters of reprimand, and 2 quit the force before they could be punished. Number 4. Dropping 40 bars. Policewoman Haley May Greenwood was arrested for dealing ice on the job, and her reaction to that was to make a rap video about it. It's as weird as it sounds. And Greenwood wasn't just arrested for moonlighting as a dealer while on duty. She was also arrested for lying to the police about a friend of her accomplice. She was immediately suspended from the force and has since pleaded guilty to 1 charge of corruption and another 3 charges of illegal substance dealing. And Greenwood, ever the optimist, was ready to pivot to a potential rapping career. In fact, she let it ignite her. Doesn't she look more like some mom from the 90s that only peripherally understands what rap is, though? Greenwood always had an interest in music and has a profile on music website Reverb Nation that describes her as a female instrumentalist, vocalist, songwriter, and composer who's just about willing to give any style of music a try. The catch was that Greenwood wasn't only willing to give music a try, but she was also willing to give being a criminal while working as a cop a try. And you're probably as surprised as we are to learn that it didn't pan out quite as well as she thought it would. In her rap video, she calls herself Batman, which is weird because Batman certainly doesn't fight crime by selling illegal substances. Greenwood also said that she didn't care whether her thoughts about being Batman are fake or reality, which is good because it shows she's not totally nuts, just really stupid. Number 3. The Departed in real life. Officer Besnik Liakatura worked for years as a criminal enforcer for Albanian crime boss Redinel Dervisaj. And Liakatura wasn't just your average corrupt cop either. He was a big part of the criminal enterprise that Dervisaj was running. Liakatura was bought all the way into the organization. He was like a bad movie corrupt cop. Liakatura had once promised the owner of a seafood restaurant that not many nice things would occur if he didn't pay the protection money that his boss demanded. He also once held another owner at bay while the man was hit by Dervisaj himself. Fortunately for residents and business people in the area, Lakatura's reign didn't last long. He was soon arrested and charged. Lakatura's hearing revealed other stories from other people who'd been victimized by Lakatura and Dervisaj. For one, after he got arrested, Lakatura ordered members of his family to go after his victims who were cooperating with the police. The government also found out that Lakatura, who was married, wasn't exactly the nicest with his girlfriend. The woman in question also testified that he had placed a GPS in her car to track her and had once flushed her head in the toilet. Just what? According to his attorney, Lakatura had simply made a mistake and didn't understand the consequences of what he was doing, which is sort of a weird excuse to give for being an enforcer to a crime boss while being a police officer. It seems like even his defense attorney didn't even know how to defend that monster. We're all willing to wager that Lakatura knew exactly what he was doing when he worked for Dervisage. It's even more unsettling when you consider the fact that Lakatura had once won 3 meritorious police duty medals, which is like a gold star for cops. But in spite of being recognized as a good cop by his department, he still found employment with Dervisage and worked with him to scare residents. Thankfully, justice was served and Lakatura was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison. His boss was also found guilty of a host of criminal activities, and he was sentenced to 57 years in prison. Law enforcement is a hard enough job as it is without these guys going around making people distrust cops even more. Number 2. Grandma Deals. Joanne Segovia ran an international illegal substances ring from her home and office computers, all while being the executive director of the Police Officers Association. Everything about this crime is absurd. First, Segovia is a 64-year-old grandmother with 2 grandkids. According to police officers and people who knew her, she was a cheerful woman who had a smile for everyone who spoke to her. Secondly, she was the executive director of the police union and supervised 2 other employees. While Segovia has never actually been a police officer, she's been working with the union since 2003. According to police officers, this meant that she was at least informally part of the police and was tied by the same code of conduct that governed police conduct. So Segovia didn't just break some obscure code of conduct. Segovia ran a criminal enterprise that put maybe thousands of synthetic pills on the streets. Segovia had accepted at least 61 illegal shipments from Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, and Singapore and distributed her packages from her home. And no one but Segovia herself knew about this. She lived with her husband, a military veteran and former butcher, and hid all her dealings from him as well. When the packages of substances arrived, she would label them wedding party favors or chocolates and sweets. The police eventually started tracking Segovia's packages. One time, she logged into her work computer and used the police union UPS account to move some of the pills she had ordered. The police also tracked her other packages and got evidence that she was importing the pills and had set up an expansive distribution network for them. Some of the packages that they had intercepted contained thousands of the pills. They also believe that some of those pills have directly led to an overdose. Police also discovered encrypted WhatsApp text messages between her and her suppliers. This was the primary way she coordinated her shipments, and it was evidence that she had been running the ring for at least 3 years. The police say she has been running the operation for at least 8 years. However, Segovia has denied the allegations. Instead, she claims that the mastermind of the entire thing was her housekeeper, who was a family friend. Right. The housekeeper was the one pulling the strings, making her go to work and use police computers. In any case, Segovia was charged with unlawfully importing substances and faced 20 years in prison if convicted. Her case is still ongoing. It's one thing for substances to be out on the street, like, that's gonna happen. Crazy thing about this is Segovia was dealing a particular pill that is a major problem that's getting worse. We're not going to name it, but it starts with an F. Anyway, it's taking the lives of teenagers left and right, and she's got grandkids that age. Like, what are you doing? She works with law enforcement, so she knows the effects. What's the thought process here? If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right here for our past release for even more corrupt cops. Number 1. The Impersonator. Jeremy DeWitt isn't a cop, but he'd do everything possible to become one. And this includes being the sort of corrupt cop that gives other cops bad names. DeWitt is America's most dedicated cop impersonator, and his entire impersonation shtick goes back at least 15 years. DeWitt lost the chance to become a real cop when he was convicted of a heinous crime that involved a minor when he was 25. So, before we all start feeling bad for this guy and his shattered dreams, trust us, he shouldn't be a cop. The conviction sent DeWitt to jail for a year and forced him to register with the local PD wherever he lives. We'll let you figure it out. But did DeWitt let that stop him from pursuing his goal of being a cop anyway? No, it didn't. He decided that if he couldn't be a genuine cop, he would be a fake cop. So he started a company called Metro State Services that technically existed to provide escort rides for funerals. But instead of merely conducting funeral escort services, DeWitt took his act up a notch and gave it a bit more panache. He painted his vehicles, all 18 of them, in what looked suspiciously like cop colors, recruited other wannabe cops, and gave them uniforms that looked like they belonged to a police department. These uniforms tricked other motorists into believing that DeWitt and his men were actual cops and made them obey their traffic directions. But this little bit of power wasn't enough for DeWitt. DeWitt made sure he looked as close to a cop as he could without technically wearing a cop's uniform. He wore black high boots, a tight-fitting police-style uniform with badges that closely resembled real police badges. He had a white helmet and drove a BMW motorcycle with flashing lights. He even wore a body camera because, what if someone needed evidence that he was committing a crime? You think that's going to come back to haunt him? While he was playing dress-up, DeWitt would make sure to exert authority he didn't have by standing at intersections and controlling traffic, pulling people over, breaking traffic rules, and even threatening motorists who went against him. He also armed himself with a pepper spray that very closely resembled a service weapon. In footage obtained from his own body camera, DeWitt is seen weaving through traffic on his motorcycle at extremely high speeds. He rode against oncoming traffic and pulled over motorists over and over again. Everything was going good until DeWitt unwittingly pulled over an off-duty Orange County Sheriff's deputy who was driving with his wife and kid. DeWitt slammed the front fender of the vehicle and threatened to use his pepper spray by placing his hands on his holster. The deputy called 911 and drove off, but discovered that he was being followed by some of DeWitt's employees who was also dressed like police officers. One of them was subsequently arrested for carrying a genuine firearm in a holster on his belt, and somehow that didn't get him busted. DeWitt carried on like this for a long time until the police finally decided to open an investigation into his antics, but only after he confronted yet another police officer. This interaction forced the police to open a broad investigation into his business. In due course, he was arrested for impersonating police officers. DeWitt took a plea that saw him go to prison for 18 months, but with 110 days served. The conviction also covered 10 different cases against him, which were all centered on impersonation. Under the plea agreement, he cannot possess firearms or any other equipment that resembles any sort of actual law enforcement equipment, including vehicles and uniforms. Before DeWitt went off to jail, he decided to draw public sympathy for his cause by appearing on the Dr. Phil show and claiming to be unjustly targeted. He said that his assault case was years ago and had nothing to do with his current police trouble. He also said he was a legitimate business person just doing his business. He asked for a polygraph test to be conducted on his claims to legitimacy, but even the test confirmed that he was being deceptive. Can you imagine what kind of cop this guy would have been had he actually been able to apply? We have a feeling we'd be doing stories on this guy no matter what. Who are some of the most corrupt cops out there who are running giant scams? Let's get right into it, starting with number 6, the Unwinable War. Former Drug Enforcement Administration Special Agent Jose Irizarry received a sentence of over 12 years in prison for operating a money laundering and fraud scheme during his time as an agent. Irizarry, apparently confused as to what his job actually was, funneled millions of dollars from undercover DEA money laundering investigations and accepted $1 million in bribes and kickback payments. Working with his wife, Natalia Gomez Irizarry, the couple was involved in a 7-year scam where they funneled $9 million from DEA undercover money laundering investigations. The couple then moved the money into bank accounts that their co-conspirators could access. Irizarry lived it up like Tony Montana. He bought top seats at sporting events, overspent on fine dining, and traveled all over. He bought his wife a Tiffany diamond ring, purchased several luxury sports cars, and bought a $767,000 home in Cartagena, a Colombian resort city. It was the modest lifestyle of a dirty cop. Once he was caught, Irizarry quickly threw co-workers under the bus in an attempt to save his own skin. He was like a child whining because they were the ones in trouble for taking cookies. Irizarry, turning snitch, claimed he worked with many other agents, prosecutors, informants, and even cartel smugglers. Irizarry's group, Team America, chose cities that would be their money laundering pickups. Team America partied hard, paying for VIP rooms at gentlemen's clubs, enjoying Amsterdam's red light district, and chartering a Colombian yacht. We imagine they probably brought a few pets home, and we don't mean doggies and kitties. Irizarry rationalized that a large part of their corruption came from the belief that the DEA was incapable of ever stopping the drug war. This defeatist attitude led to the new strategy of, if you can't beat them, join them. And they stopped trying to fight the war and found a way to profit from it instead. While former colleagues have dismissed Irizarry of making up stories to reduce his sentence, the U.S. Justice Department started investigating his allegations and interviewed dozens of current and former DEA agents and prosecutors. At best, his colleagues were ignorant or turned a blind eye, but at worst, they were also a part of the operation. In the indictment, Irizarry looked like the sole corrupt agent and mastermind behind the whole scheme, but if his stories are to be believed, he just had the misfortune of being caught. One of the other people accused was George Zumberos, who often traveled for money laundering investigations and was accused of enjoying access to commission funds that he used for personal purchases and trips. Authorities also subpoenaed George's brother, Michael Zumberos, a photographer who traveled with the agents. Michael would have been granted immunity for his cooperation, but he refused to testify, leading to his imprisonment for civil contempt. Zumberos' lawyer implied his client was only jailed because prosecutors wanted to bring more indictments due to the embarrassment they had faced over the whole scandal. Irizarry received a 12-year prison sentence, and since his arrest, wrote the self-published book, Getting Back on Track, where he owned up to his mistakes. When his legal troubles began, his wife began seeking a divorce. We guess a corrupt, philandering DEA snitch doesn't make for a good husband. For a deeper dive into Irizarry's story, click the link here. Number 5. Playing it safe. Bradley Francis, a London Metropolitan Police officer, stole £1,500 from a safe to settle his credit card debts. It was the most irresponsible way to be responsible. He took the money from Stoke Newington Police Station in East London. Francis accessed the safe by pretending that a member of the public had turned in £50 to be placed in the locker. He then used a fleece pullover to cover his actions, because that never looked suspicious, reaching in, grabbing a stack of cash, then just walking out like Ocean's 11. When they noticed that money was missing, Francis's co-workers checked the security camera footage and caught him in the act. That one small action cost him his marriage, home, and career. Francis's family says they would have stepped in to help him pay off the credit card debt, but he was too proud to ask for help. Within 30 minutes, he settled his debt, but he had to resign as a police constable because of it. In London's Southwark Crown Court, the judge lectured Francis for abusing his position and taking advantage of the public's trust in police officers. Until he stole the money, Francis had been a well-respected member of the police force. His colleagues vouched for his character and contribution to society, making it clear that he acted out of desperation. Francis pleaded guilty to the charge of theft by employee. In the security camera footage, he spent a long time hovering in front of the safe before he put the money under his fleece, likely contemplating his actions. The cash he took was public money from an ongoing intent to supply investigation. At the time, he was the only person with access to the safe. In court, Francis was remorseful, but the judge still sentenced him to 10 months in prison and gave him 3 months to pay back the money he stole. In his efforts to erase his debt, Francis earned himself a new one. Having lost his job as a policeman, Francis's father planned on hiring him at the family firm once he finished his sentence. Ironically, if he'd asked his father for help in the first place, he would have never had to go to prison. Number 4. Sweepstakes Scammer. The Allen Lottery Scheme Organization, also referred to as ALSO, was an international lottery fraud scam that preyed on vulnerable and elderly Americans. The organization was named after Shelly-Ann Shireen Allen, a Jamaican policewoman that ran the operation. A Wisconsin woman known as Victim 1 lost $150,000 and her home blew the whole thing wide open. The victim received a call from someone claiming to be a representative of the Publishers Clearinghouse and even played background music which made her believe it was real. The representative told her she'd won a house, a Mercedes-Benz, and $18 million. She was told to keep it secret from the bank when she deposited the money. That advice makes more sense when it comes to dealing with your moocher of a brother, not the bank. Representatives contacted her over many months to instruct her to send cash, checks, and money orders to people in the US and Jamaica. They told her she was paying fees to receive her winnings, and she was so convinced she sold her house to make a $30,000 payment. Overall, also defrauded at least 20 elderly Americans out of at least $1.69 million. The group specifically targeted elderly US citizens who had money. Allen spent most of the stolen money on shopping trips. Prosecutors claimed she worked with 6 co-conspirators to move the funds through multiple accounts. Allen was arrested in Florida in February 2022 and charged for running also. While they were arresting her, police discovered that she was also a drug mule. When Allen was arrested, authorities found packages of powdery contraband hidden on her during their pat-down. She was literally covered in it. They took her to the hospital after asking if she had swallowed any of it, and she said yes. There, she regurgitated 90 pellets of that substance, carrying a street value of over $37,000. She was ultimately sentenced to almost 3 years for the drug charges. The hero cop is still awaiting sentencing for stealing from old people. Number 3. Extra duty scheme. 4 police officers, David Cilio, Paul Pavia, Mark Liggy, and Christopher Bromes, took part in a scheme where they claimed the money for canceled extra duty project fees. The officers submitted at least 643 false payroll vouchers, which amounted to $187,618. The utility company that paid the money was an affiliate of Eversource, which regularly hired off-duty officers for security. Cilio, Pavia, Liggy, and Bromes worked in the division that administers the extra duty program. According to the police union rules, contractors that canceled a job later than 10 p.m. the previous day had to pay 4 hours of the officer's time. Part of the city's contract with the police union stipulated that jobs were offered to police officers first. Investigators were auditing the process used to assign jobs to off-duty officers, such as directing traffic and construction sites, or providing security at events when they noticed something unusual. Few officers seem to be collecting a large number of cancellation fees. Extra duty work paid $68 an hour, and the jobs the officers claimed the fees for were never assigned to them. Assistant Police Chief James Matheny began an inquiry into the possibility that at least 2 officers, Cilio and Pavia, had submitted vouchers improperly for canceled jobs. The Internal Affairs Division found suspicious vouchers from Liggy and Bromes as well. To make matters worse, the officers were veterans of the force. Cilio and Pavia had been Stamford police officers for 29 years. Liggy had been with the department for 33 years, and Bromes had spent 21 years with the department. The investigation found that the only sergeant to receive vouchers for canceled jobs was Bromes, with 34 vouchers. The other officers had far more. Cilio had 256, Pavia had 221, and Liggy had 132. In June 2019, the group was arrested. All 4 faced charges of first-degree larceny and conspiracy to commit first-degree larceny, which seems redundant, but okay, throw the book at them. Judge Gary White approved accelerated rehabilitation for Cilio, Pavia, and Liggy. The pretrial program is offered to people accused of non-violent crime. They were eligible for the program if they helped provide information against Christopher Bromes. White said the original charges against them would be dropped if they committed no other crimes during the 6-month period. Each officer also had to make a $10,000 contribution to their chosen charity. While the 3 officers falsely claimed extra duty vouchers, they handed the paperwork to Bromes, who failed to record the required paperwork and oversaw the office. Number 2. Everyone's scamming. Over 131 people participated in one of the most significant disability fraud cases in U.S. history. The participants included 72 former New York City police officers and 8 former firefighters. The scam operated for 2 decades and stole over $400 million in taxpayer money. The plot began in 1988 when 4 facilitators coached hundreds of applicants on ways to convince the Social Security Administration that they were entitled to monthly disability payments as they had psychiatric conditions that made them unable to work. Many retired police officers and firefighters began to feign mental illnesses to receive benefits. Some pretended they suffered post-traumatic stress after the 9/11 attacks. Long Island resident Raymond LaValle was the wizard behind the curtain. He represented the applicants and coached them into making false claims, and they learned from him how to work the system and get fraudulent benefits. LaValle could have received a maximum of 25 years on top of the original grand larceny, but in return for his assistance with the case, he received a 1-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay $2 million in restitution. LaValle, like any good ringleader, had minions. How could he be a ringleader without an actual ring to lead? John Minerva, former Nassau County Assistant District Attorney and retired police officer, helped LaValle orchestrate the scheme. Thomas Hale and Joseph Esposito assisted them. The group coached NYPD officers, firefighters, and corrections officers into making the fraudulent claims. Some suspects received hundreds of thousands of dollars in benefits. One man, Richard Costantino, received over $200,000 in payments, and another participant, Louis Pertidoin, collected $395 in disability payments. Amongst those charged were 2 doctors who received kickbacks for giving bogus diagnosis. More than 100 applicants pleaded guilty, but most received no jail time as long as they paid back the money they stole. More than $1 million was seized from bank accounts, with additional seizures expected. The district attorney's office received more than $25 million in restitution and forfeiture. Number 1. Socioeconomic Matters. New York police officer Yaniris Jen DeLeon was involved in a medical insurance fraud scheme where she gave confidential information about car crash victims in exchange for payment. Anthony Rose, the alleged mastermind, paid thousands of dollars for protected patient information to give to insurance scammers. Those scammers would then steer the victims to a New York and New Jersey network of doctors and lawyers for unnecessary treatments. The scheme made over $18 million, operating from roughly 2014 to 2019. The scheme was based out of a call center in Queens, New York. Rose targeted people in, quote, the hood, since he felt that people in Manhattan could afford expensive attorneys. The operation comprised of at least 60,000 people's information. They paid NYPD employees and people working in federally funded hospitals as much as $4,000 monthly for patients' information. DeLeon pleaded not guilty and was released on $50,000 bail. Her attorney claimed most of the charges in the indictment had nothing to do with her. It wasn't the first scheme that Anthony Rose helped run. He bribed his brother Frank Rose, a former field representative for the city of Linden's neighborhood redevelopment program, in exchange for roughly $1.3 million in construction services. Anthony, being a great father, admitted that Frank awarded 2 of his companies approximately 37 contracts that totaled $1,329,000 in exchange for the corrupt payments. A judge sentenced Frank Rose to 60 months in federal prison for accepting corrupt cash payments and other benefits for giving favorable treatment to specific contractors. He also had to pay $189,000 in restitution to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. U.S. District Judge Ann E. Thompson granted the government's motion for Anthony's downward departure as his corruption in the case helped authorities stop the fraudulent scheme from continuing. He received a sentence of 6 months of house arrest. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section who you trust more, a politician or a cop.